Talk, where Spokane Talks hosts seek out and discuss the latest on a variety of interesting topics to Spokane and North Idaho. Here's today's host, Mike Fitzsimmons.
This edition of Let's Talk, I'm Mike Fitzsimmons, and we're talking politics, and we have the primary election coming up in August, and we've got a number of candidates that we've been chatting with who are pursuing a number of different offices. One of them is my guest for this segment. He is Kelly Cruz, and he is seeking the office of mayor of the City of Spokane. He's a lifelong Spokaneite who grew up in the West Central neighborhood. North Central High School graduate. He has been engaged in in service to the community for a great long time. 4 times the chair of the West Central Community Council, and also currently is the chairman of the board of COPS, the community policing program for the city of Spokane. And Kelly, welcome.
Great to be here, Mike. Thank you.
Now, you've run for office before.
Yes, I've run for
shot.
Council District 3 a couple times, and didn't quite make it into the primary. But
Okay, what did you learn in that process that you now can apply in this particular race and benefit from?
More direct contact with constituents. The door knocking is important. While websites and literature can get the message out, people want to hear from you and look in your eyes and see the truthfulness of your message.
Now, I understand you've been doing that a lot already.
Yes.
What are you hearing at the doorstep? What are people telling you?
A lot of people are frustration with public safety, crime, the roads. Those are the 2 biggest topics when I'm out there speaking to folks in our community. So my campaign message is public safety first. And
which is not a surprise to you, by the way, because I mean, the West Central Community Center or area is an area where a considerable amount of property crimes and crimes against persons takes place. It's one of the economically depressed areas in the state. One of the most. The 3rd legislative district, for example, is an area where it's been economically a problem area for quite some time.
Yes, it has, Mike. And we've had issues come up, and we've dealt with local authorities. Where we haven't gotten the traction is our 3 amigos with the state legislature in 3rd District. They very rarely are seen in West Central, East Central, Hilliard. They pick the spots in the lower South Hill or up near 5 Mile to have their town open houses and stuff, and they limit the people that come. And for 22 years, that in the aggregate that they've been in charge, nothing's really moved in West Central or this community, So I've decided that, if I can become mayor of the city of Spokane, I can use that bully pulpit to make them more accountable to not only the citizens of West Central, but citizens of the city of Spokane.
They seem automatically to get reelected, a lot of them.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they're sort of bulletproof when it comes to accountability, because particularly from that constituency in the West Central neighborhood, because while they love to wave that flag and say we serve these people, we're in favor of protecting their interests and all that sort of thing, they really don't have to, because there's no political cost not to.
Yeah. It's interesting with the opioid crisis and homelessness. I went to their town hall, and that was kind of a secondary subject this last year. And I thought, really, with all that's going on in this community, we have a housing shortage, we have drug problem, opiates, and you're not talking about how you're going to help us out with that. Instead, they were talking about more taxes. And
Sure.
That equates to putting people out on the street, because when you raise taxes and fees, that's how come people become homeless or near homeless, the working poor. And so at some point, the cost of government gets in the way of people being able to have a house and they have a life and they have a career.
Since you brought up the opiate issue, the city council dealt with that at a recent meeting in which they are exploring whether or not to bring legal action or to join others who are bringing legal action against the opiate producers, the pharmaceutical industry, on the theory that somehow or other they're going to be able to punish them for oversupplying drugs in our community that are lending themselves to to the overall problem. Do you see this as a sort of a fool's errand to a certain extent?
Yeah, it's kind of wasted energy. I mean, because that type of process, I don't think any of us now will be around to see the checks cut or see the benefit from that, just because of the scope of it. And also I'd like to know, as a taxpayer and a resident, what are the costs and what's the outcome going to be for the community? If there's high cost and little to no outcome, I say absolutely not. I spoke to you earlier about my avocation in West Central and being on a prevention coalition there that was started there. Right. And I've been there for the 6 years it exists. I was there from day one. And we promote a message in the community for alcohol and drug abatement by youth, so to keep them from getting down the wrong track. And what discouraged me most last year is our organization applied for and received a drug-free communities grant. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but it was a $625,000 grant for 5 years to do direct messaging and things in the community to prevent and reduce those incidences. I can't get any traction at the city level, either from city council or the administration, promoting prevention in our community. And I would tell you that 10 years ago, if we'd at least concentrated 20% of our efforts on prevention, we might not have the addiction problem we have on our streets today.
Why is there no interest in that?
A lot of people will say there's no outcome in that. Well, it can't be measured because when you move a youth on, we don't put a barcode on them and see, well, they went down the right path, so many.
Right.
But it shows up statistically by the number of people you have on the street, I think, in crisis. So I don't understand myself. Prevention is one of the ways that you can abate and start to reduce the fuel to the fire. When I say fuel, we're funneling kids now. Drugs are right down in our elementary schools. I mean, they're very prevalent in our elementary schools.
Sure.
Since the 90s, they've slid from college to high school to junior high, and now they're down in the elementary school level. And I simply say at some point we have to take a firm stand in the sand and start eliminating the fuel, i.e. the young youth that are coming up through our school systems.
This is a fundamental public safety issue, and that is one of the fundamental municipal functions that a city should be paying a lot of attention to, but isn't.
Yeah, and all we ask for is materialistic support. We're not looking for financial because we already got the grant from the federal government. Right. We're looking for a partnership from the City of Spokane and to promote that message and to give it a little bit bigger voice in the community. And it saddened me that, we couldn't get any traction, but we continue to move on. And you'll see some of our billboards up. We'll have some messaging out this summer and be working on some programming too.
Not unrelated to that particular issue, of course, is the ability to incarcerate offenders in our community, and the city is toying with the idea, Kelly, of getting into the jail business and such, and you've got some serious reservations about whether they're going about that correctly, too.
Yeah, because I was involved in 2009 with the county's talk about a jail. They weren't quite sure if it's going to be all on the county campus or out. And the process that they went through, it's an extensive process. You can't just buy a 50-year-old building like we're going to buy it, spray in a van, and say we're going to have a jail facility. There's some things you have to go through before you even start building the jail, a site study, an evaluation, things like that. It's ludicrous to think that for the $4.7 million a year we spend on those services with municipal court space, staff, and jail inmates, that we can go out at no cost and find the ground, build a building, and staff it. By the way, those people that are in the cells will have to be escorted from, don't care if it's just down the hall. State law says they must be escorted to and from the jail. So there's a whole another layer of government and costs there, not just the wages, but then there's benefit packages and stuff. See where I'm going with this, Mike?
Sure.
Expansion of government. And I simply say that if you have an issue with the county, sit down and talk it out. Let's, see how we can reduce those costs with the county. But to a greater point, you and I both know the jail was built about 43 years ago. It was built, the biggest thing is it was built prior to ADA compliance. So it's non-compliant with ADA. It was built to standards that don't even meet that. And with that most recent death at the jail, I wouldn't be surprised to hear somebody from the Department of Justice making some questions or inquiries. And that's nothing against our jail staff. It just has to do with the physical building and what you can do in it. And
but this is an issue that both the city and the county must figure out how to coordinate a response to it. Adding to the fact that, as you say, 43 years ago when it was built, it was just about the same time that the retaining of mentally ill individuals in institutions and what have you. Basically, they locked their doors and sent them out to the streets, and the county jails and the incarceration facilities at the county level have turned out to be the mental health facilities, or at least the warehouses for mental health individuals, more so than almost any other kind of an offender. That's who is occupying space in our jails at the present time. This has been a total systematic failure on the part of government at the state, county, and municipal level, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I spoke to you earlier about this, but one of the original proposals from the county in 2009 with the jail project was to build a 3-story structure behind the jail, which would create a larger intake area and would have medical staff. So if somebody comes in and there's an issue, either mental health or it's a drug addiction, they get a bed, direct services right there. Then it's determined if they need to go through the criminal justice system, if they what the level of their crime is. If they haven't, they're giving programming and services right there. And in the model that I saw, they would have required anybody who came into the building, before they left, they would at least have a GED level of education to get them started on that next thing. Yes, there is a cost for that, but I would submit to you, what's the cost for all the things we're doing now? Just turning people in and out and rotating them through the jail system, not being able to help them. The other thing that I recently talked about too was Providence just last year built a 100-bed behavioral health building just along the freeway over there, east of Lewiston Clark. And I found out from several people that since it's been open, we haven't even used a quarter of the bed space. And I'm going, why is that? We have such a need for, those beds, and yet they're not being used. What's the stumbling block? That's where the city should be stepping up and working with Providence or whoever to use more of that building and not go out and purchase buildings and run our own programs.
Are they even aware that that's the case?
I don't know. I haven't heard. I haven't sat down with city council people or talked about that. But I was out talking, and somebody told me, you do realize they've only used a quarter or less of that building. Most of it's sitting vacant. And I'm going, really? Because it was built at that time to help us with some of the situation we're having going on now. So I don't know if it's a cooperation issue between the city and Providence or whoever, but we have a facility that's being way underutilized, and we could desperately use those beds.
I came across a statement by somebody in the newspaper not too long ago, having to do with all of the candidates running for mayor, stating that none of you or those who are your opponents are particularly well qualified because you've never run multi-million-dollar businesses and such, and managed employment, of the level that the city is engaged in, and all that sort of thing. How do you respond to that sort of
Well, what I like to tell folks, for over a decade, I have a volunteer leadership in the community and various boards and committees, and in that time I've received 2 citizenship awards from the City of Spokane for outstanding volunteer leadership in our community. So I bring those credentials. The only thing I don't bring is a $163,000 paycheck. We have a pretty good budget at Spokane Cops, and I oversee that in making sure that we are within our means. That's by no expanse the size of the city budget, but it gives to my skills in working and administrating with budgets and things. The other thing is, you have to know the inside of City Hall if you want to start on day one. If you know little about the process or the departments or how it functions, you will spend 6 months to a year on the learning curve.
Learning the ropes.
We can't do that. We don't have the time, Mike.
We don't.
Time's out. We have a lot of problems on our doorstep. It's time to elect somebody who has proven leadership out in the community.
Through your interface with city government, you have already established those relationships.
Well, yeah, through my neighborhood. I'll give you my neighborhood example. We had an issue. All neighborhoods can apply for photo red traffic calming projects.
Yeah.
North end of the Maple Street Bridge, we desperately wanted a light there that flashed the speed and reminded people to slow down, because people go across at 40, 50 miles an hour,
Yes,
don't
they
slow
do.
down, they hit the light.
Yep.
So city engineer works with the neighborhood. We locate a spot right at the north end of the Maple Street Bridge as you're coming up. Goes to city council. They approve the project. But it gets into City Hall, and somebody who's designing thinks it's a better idea to put it about a block north, which is half a block south of the red light.
Yeah, Moon there.
Yeah, so they put it there, and we had to argue for 3 or 4 months along with our city council representatives that, hey, this is the one we bargained for, and it's not effective. Even the traffic engineer worked with us. It's just the craziest thing I ever saw. But he can't overrule it. So after all the, negotiating and back and forth, we were able to get the light put last spring back to where it belongs. And since I've been seeing it, I frequent that bridge about 6 times a day, and I've noticed people slow down a lot more than they used to. So
Early enough to make a difference.
Early enough to make a difference,
Because
yes.
there's a wall there. I mean,
Yeah,
there's
so that's
nobody else,
one of the things,
right.
The other thing, I have experience working with not only our local folks, but state agencies. And I'll give you an example. I hosted a community forum 2 years ago in 2017 on sex offenders in our neighborhoods, because in my neighborhood I learned that there was 2 blocks where we had about 18 sex offenders, and of that 18, 10 of them were level 3. So I put together a community forum, and it was basically members on a panel from DLC, from the people who have the vendor houses, and other agencies that work with sex offenders. And it was moderated by one of your compatriots from KXY, Melissa Luck. Mm-hmm. And what I thought was unique was when we're having this discussion, and I forget who it was, said that I would feel safe having my kids walk down that 2 blocks with those offenders there. And Melissa looked at him, and I looked at him, and she said to him, there's no way I would allow my kids to walk down that block. And I don't think any normal person would either. So through that collaboration, I got DLC to change some policies. I got the City of Spokane to acknowledge their shortcomings in dropping of the ball. So now all those vendors that sign up with DLC in the City of Spokane, their application goes before a city attorney who reviews that and determines whether it's okay or not. But beyond that, I mentioned some shortcomings to our local leaders, at city council level and the administration. Here's some things we can do. There's a ordinance from Puyallup in 2016 that came out, and they classified these houses and other businesses as a significant impact business, and they require them to get a license, to be inspected by the building inspector, fire marshal, and those things. And that's right out of when they get the packet from DLC to be a vendor. They come out and look at your house, determine the neighborhood, It's good. But one of the other things at the very last bottom of the page is that the house will be inspected for adequate electrical, plumbing, ventilation, fire. And so I asked DLC, I says, okay, who in DLC is a certified building inspector? Oh, no, we don't do that. That's not our wheelhouse. Who at the city can do that? Oh, because the police department at that time was the one that was notified. Right. Well, we don't do that. Well, other communities.
So it doesn't get done, basically.
Doesn't get done.
Right.
And so, this is a double-edged sword, because what I was playing, not only is there concern from the neighborhood with the people that are being housed there and the danger to the community, but I was flipping it in the other side. You and I are paying for these people. What if the house burns down,
Sure.
West Central or East Central or wherever it's at?
Yeah.
And 4 or 5 of those offenders die in that house. That's on your and I dime.
You bet.
What we're talking about once again is warehousing at a state level and using a patch over both eyes and hoping nothing goes wrong.
There has been, however, as I mentioned, since several decades back, a benign neglect with respect to a number of offenders and the mentally ill by the Washington State Legislature. Now, one of the things as a mayor, if you're a mayor of the second largest city in the state of Washington, obviously you're going to have to spend some time lobbying the legislature to see these problems and do something about them. Do you have a plan for that, Kelly?
Yeah, in fact, I think I have a better background than anybody that's running, even including Council President Stuckert, who's been in leadership role for 8 years at City Hall, because he just plain doesn't get it. He doesn't understand it. And, I gave you some background on that. I know the facts, so I'd be prepared to go over and testify before a legislature on behalf of the city and stand up for our rights, because there are some
But at the
things
same
under state
time,
law
you've
we can
also
do.
mentioned the fact that some of the senators, some of the representatives who you would need to be in league with you are just as much responsible for the benign neglect that we're talking about here. How do you get them rallying in the process as well? It's one thing to get the folks who agree with you, but it's the other thing.
Well, I
if
would
the
sit
folks who
down
don't
and meet
show
with
up-
them and use the carrot approach. How can you want to make this a better community? And these are some of the things we have addressed. These are some of the things that we feel are important and that you should be advocating for. Short of that, I would show up at one of their town halls and mimic that same message in public to them. Because, if the carrot doesn't work, maybe the shame will. It frustrated me because in that procedure, I did talk with our 3 legislatures at a special meeting, and was asked by one of them, "What do you want to see happen, Kelly?" And I said, "Well, at this point, what I'd like to see, because basically DLC was violating the policy and an RCW, I said, I'd like to see hearings before the legislature so we can straighten this process out." You know what the response from one of them was? "Well, we can do that. We don't want to embarrass the department." I said, I looked right at him. I said, "God help each one of you if a child in my neighborhood's raped in one of those blocks or assaulted or even groomed." Because what happens is, what you'll hear, Mike, is they grow out of that pedophile or that rape stage. They don't grow out of it. What they do is they start grooming kids, and they create the next batch of offenders for us.
You say, as you knock on doors, that the folks are talking about streets. They're talking about public safety. We've been discussing some public safety aspects. Let's move to the streets. What about that? I mean, Spokane is notorious for having
we have a high
sea of tranquility on its roadways.
Yeah, and what frustrates me is Broadway Avenue is in such bad shape that the ambulances won't even go down it with a patient in it. They try to find a side street or somewhere. And here we are up on Maple and Ash from Wellesley North. We're getting ready to scratch that down and resurface it. We did that in the first bond about 12 years ago. We did those streets.
That's correct.
And now they have to be done again. And we were sold this boatload of talk that, we've got to dig it out, put a new base in, and put a good surface on. And where's that gotten us? They said it was going to last 17 or 20 years. It hasn't been 12 years, and it's already coming apart. And we're still waiting on Broadway to get the street fixed. And that's frustration I hear all over town, is that how come we're just not grinding our streets down and fixing, some of these residential streets and stuff. And, I would clean up the process quite a bit and make sure that we do a little bit more maintenance on our streets and that we get to some of those. Everybody pays taxes and expects good roads. And when you have to dodge potholes from your house to work every day, I know exactly how it can be frustrating.
There was just a recent article indicating that crime is down in the Spokane area in general, but there's a lot of nuances to that particular reality, and we have a problem with property crime in the county as well as in the city. A lot of burglary and what have you. Are we adequately policed in this community, or would you see a necessity to increase the
There's
force?
a necessity to increase, but there's also the issue that people become so frustrated that they're underreporting, they're not reporting. I've spoken to the chief several times about this, just as recent as about a week ago when he had a community meeting. I said, you need to get that trust back in the department. I don't care how you do it. People, even if you're not going to solve the crime, if you can get 3 out of 5 calls an officer to respond to, you'll go a long ways to people reporting crimes. Because I volunteer at a cop shop a couple times a week, besides being board chair. And I hear that frustration when people call in and just want to talk about their incident and stuff. Then you ask them, well, let's go ahead and here's how you can get a report and get that on. Well, what's the difference? It's not going to make any difference. And so that's a lot of it is because underreporting.
Yeah. Time is running out on us. Let me ask you a question. How can folks get involved in your campaign? How do they reach you? Do you have a website?
I have a website. It's
What can they do?
www.cruzformayor.com. They can reach me there, or they can reach me at my email, kpc2019spokane@gmail.com. And I'll give out my cell phone. It's 509-862-8512. And I'll be at various community events over the next couple of weeks, and they can reach me there. So.
And one last question. Explain to the viewers why you should be the next mayor.
Because I believe with my background, I can bring public safety to our community and address our economic needs. And I say that because we're not taking advantage of Amazon building out there. It's great, that's a feather in our cap, but we should be building on that. We have the Northeast Public Development Authority that's just sitting there languishing. We should be promoting that, looking for state dollars to get that off the ground and get it going. Those would both attract people to build houses and other businesses in our community and raise our economic level. So.
He is Kelly Cruz, and he seeks your vote for mayor of the City of Spokane in the August primary election upcoming. That's Let's Talk for this segment. I'm Mike Fitzsimmons, and thank you very much for watching.
Let's Talk is produced in Spokane, Washington by Spokane Talks Media, which is solely responsible for its content. Ask a question, recommend a guest, and hear this program again online anytime at SpokaneTalksMedia.com. We wish you a great day.